The turkey on the counter looked more like a block of ice than food. 20 pounds of frozen weight, rock solid, slowly collecting moisture in the cold kitchen air. The heater hadn't worked properly all week, but my parents kept saying, "We'll deal with it after the holidays." My breath fogged the air every time I exhaled. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't even have to unlock it to know what it was. A group chat notification. Holiday bliss. Created by my mum. A photo loaded on the screen. My mother, smiling wide, holding a champagne glass. My father beside her, relaxed, sunlit, wearing clothes he only packed for vacations. And behind them my twin sisters, already wearing sunglasses indoors, clinking glasses in what was very clearly a first-class airplane cabin. The caption said, "Finally, some peace." A second message came through almost instantly. "Boarding now. See you in 10 days. House alarm is set. Don't wait up." I slowly looked back at the turkey. I was 13 years old. I didn't know how to cook a turkey. I didn't know how to fix a broken heating system. And apparently, I didn't qualify for a plane ticket. I didn't cry. I didn't text back asking why. I just stood there, shivering, realizing something that hit harder than the cold family was a word they used when it was convenient. And right then, I wasn't convenient. The house was silent in a way that felt loud, like pressure pushing against my ears. I couldn't cook the turkey, so I dug through the freezer and found a single frozen burrito buried in the back. The packaging was stiff with frost, but it was food. I put it in the microwave and pressed start. The low hum filled the kitchen, the only sound proving I wasn't completely alone. Then pop. Silence. The microwave went dark. The refrigerator shut off. Every light in the house died at once. I stood there, frozen, swallowed by darkness as the cold rushed in faster than before. And I didn't scream, I didn't panic. I calculated. I had a coat. I had blankets. If I stayed in one room, I could survive the night. That's when light swept across the kitchen window. Two sharp beams of white cut through the darkness, slicing the cold air and catching dust particles as they floated helplessly. A vehicle was pulling into the driveway. For one brief embarrassing second, I thought it was them, that they'd come back, that someone had finally realized you don't leave a 13-year-old alone for 10 days. I ran to the window. It wasn't my parents' car. A massive matte black SUV sat at the gate, engine low and steady, like it was waiting rather than arriving. A man stepped out. He was tall, wrapped in a heavy wool coat that looked more expensive than anything my parents owned. He didn't hurry. He moved with certainty, the kind that comes from never needing permission. The doorbell didn't work. No power, so he knocked. Not loud, not polite. The sound carried through the house like a verdict. I opened the door. I knew who he was before he spoke. I'd only seen him in whispers at funerals, in faded photographs, mentioned carefully when adults thought I wasn't listening. Uncle Robert, the family's exile, the man my father called heartless, the man my mother called dangerous. He didn't smile. He didn't ask how I was. His eyes scanned me, my shaking hands, the dark house, the cold fog leaving my mouth. Then he looked past me into the unlit hallway. "They remembered the alarm," he said calmly, "but not the electric bill." He stepped inside without waiting, pulled off a leather glove, checked his watch. "Uncle Robert," I whispered. He looked down at me. His eyes weren't cruel. They weren't kind either. They were focused, like he was evaluating a failed system. "Pack a bag, Alyssa," he said. "Essentials only. You're not staying in a place like this." "Where are we going?" I asked. "Anywhere else." I ran upstairs. I didn't take toys. I didn't take the framed family photo on my nightstand. I packed clothes, school books, my laptop. For minutes, when I came back down, he was standing in the kitchen, staring at the frozen turkey still sitting uselessly on the counter. "Leave it," he said. "Let it spoil it, Fitz." I followed him outside and climbed into the passenger seat. The door closed with a solid thud. Inside, the air was warm, controlled. The leather smelled new, intentional. As we drove away, I watched my childhood home fade into the darkness behind us. I didn't know it then, but I had crossed a line. I was leaving the world of people who get left behind, and entering the world of people who decide who gets left at all. Living with Uncle Robert wasn't about comfort. It was about recalibration. Uncle Robert's house wasn't warm. It was precise. A brutalist structure of concrete and glass balanced on the edge of a cliff. There were no soft corners, no decorative clutter. Every line had intention. Every window had purpose. And the silence. It wasn't the hollow, abandoned silence of my parents' house. It was controlled, heavy, protective. For the first few months, I tried to disappear. I was good at that. I moved without sound, ate quickly, cleaned immediately, retreated before anyone could notice I existed. I believed invisibility was rent. One evening, he found me in the library. I was sitting in the shadow of a bookshelf, watching him work from a distance. I froze, waiting to be told I was intruding. He didn't look up. "You're doing it again," he said calmly. "Doing what?" I asked, barely audible. "Trying to shrink yourself. You think if you're quiet enough, you won't be a burden." He finally lifted his eyes to mine. "You believe silence makes you smaller." A pause. "You're wrong." He tapped the blueprint spread across his desk. "Silence is information." He gestured for me to come closer. On the table lay the plans for a commercial development, lines, measurements, calculated geometry. "Tell me what you see." "A lobby, elevators, office suites." He didn't nod. "Look again." I hesitated. Then I stopped trying to answer correctly, and just observed. "The reception desk faces west," I said slowly. "Afternoon glare will blind whoever sits there. The elevators are too far from the entrance. People will crowd the center and disrupt traffic flow." I looked up. "It's inefficient." For the first time, he smiled. It wasn't warm. It was sharp, precise, exactly. He leaned back. "You see weaknesses because you've spent your life in the background studying how people behave." He didn't say it gently. "Your family overlooked you, treated you like part of the furniture." A pause. "But while they were busy performing for cameras, you were studying the room." That was the shift. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered definition. The gift of the shadow, he called it. The ability to see truth because no one thinks you matter enough to hide it from. "You don't talk, Alyssa," he said. "You observe. That isn't weakness. It's leverage." From that night forward, my education began, not with toys, with textbooks, structural engineering, contract law, negotiation strategy. He taught me that architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about behavior. "Control the structure," he told me, "and you control the people inside it." My teenage years weren't marked by dances or games. They were marked by construction sites and conference rooms, where I sat quietly taking notes not on numbers, but on tells. Who avoided eye contact, who was desperate. I stopped waiting for messages from my mother. Stopped looking at vacation photos. Glossy images are just facades. I was learning to see the beams beneath the paint. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was a blueprint in progress, and the foundation being poured beneath me was steel, concrete, and resolve. By 16, I understood leverage better than most executives, but there was one final lesson. I needed a proper workspace. My desk was an old folding table from storage. It shook every time I drew a line. I found Robert reviewing reports in the solarium. "I need a new desk," I said, "and a drafting lamp. The lighting isn't adequate." He didn't look up. "How much?" 800. Silence. "And no." I blinked. "He drove cars worth more than entire neighborhoods." "Why not?" "Because buying you furniture teaches you nothing." He slid a check across the table. $5,000. "I don't want you to purchase a desk," he said. "I want you to design a sanctuary." Now he looked at me directly. "Your family made you feel like a guest in your own home." His voice was steady. "Build a space where you are the authority. Build something that makes you untouchable. If you can build that," he said, "you can build anything." I took the check. For the next 3 months, obsession replaced sleep. I didn't buy furniture. I engineered an environment. I ripped out the carpet to expose the concrete beneath. Solid, honest, painted the walls a deep slate gray that absorbed light instead of begging for it. Designed a custom L-shaped desk and hired a local welder to build the frame, then negotiated the price down by pointing out structural flaws in his previous work. He respected that. I chose an ergonomic chair that felt less like furniture and more like a cockpit. The room wasn't warm. It wasn't decorative. It was operational. A command center. When it was finished, I called Robert in. He stood in the doorway without speaking, checked the welds with his fingers, tested the light angle, noted the acoustic panels. Then he turned to me and gave a single nod. Sharp, final. "Good." That nod was worth more than the $5,000. It was the first time an adult had looked at something I built and treated it like it mattered. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with echoes from a life I no longer lived. "Mum just landed in Aspen. The twins look adorable in their ski gear. Dad says he's thinking of you. Hope you're studying hard." I scrolled past photos of them laughing in lodges I would never enter. Years ago, it would have broken me. I would have searched myself for the flaw. But sitting in my gray, silent sanctuary, surrounded by fresh paint and quiet power, I understood the truth. Their rejection didn't damage me. It liberated me. I didn't need their approval to fill space. I could build my own walls. Time compressed. I finished high school early. Architecture school came next, fully funded by Robert, who called it an infrastructure investment. I graduated top of my class, opened my own firm at by 28, I was shaping skylines. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was designing permanence. Uncle Robert didn't fade, he concluded. A business decision. His heart was failing, structural integrity compromised beyond repair. He refused hospitals, chose the master bedroom overlooking the ocean where he could track tides like metrics. 2 days before the end, he called me in. No sentiment, only strategy. Sit, he said, his voice dry and deliberate. He pointed to a thick, sealed manila envelope on the nightstand. That's the demolition order. Don't open it until the reading. I won't. They'll come back, he said calmly. The moment the monitor flatlines, they'll smell money. They think I'm their personal bank. They think you're the help. His grip tightened around my wrist stronger than it should have been. Don't let them in, he said. Not into your head. Not into this house. He died early Tuesday morning, between 4 and 5, efficiently. I didn't cry. I had procedures to execute. Lawyer, funeral home, security. The service was scheduled 3 days later. Private, Cliffside Chapel. At 10:55 a.m., 3 stretched limousines rolled up the gravel drive. Rented, I recognized the plates. My family stepped out, designer black, oversized sunglasses, performative grief. My mother collapsed dramatically into my father's arms, sobbing for a brother she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. My sisters live-streamed their sorrow, dabbing eyes that never produced tears. It looked rehearsed. I stood near the grave in a charcoal suit I designed myself. They walked straight past me. They didn't see the founder of a multi-million-dollar firm. They saw the 13-year-old girl in the freezing kitchen, invisible, replaceable. Poor Robert, my mother whispered loudly. Thank God he never married. The estate should cover the debts. And the summer house renovations, they weren't mourning. They were budgeting. They weren't grieving. They were calculating. After the service, they cornered me near the hearse. No hugs, no questions. Alyssa, my father said, his voice coated in that familiar, dismissive politeness. You look exhausted. He thought I was staff. We'll take it from here, sweetheart, my mother added, patting my arm with her gloved hand. You've done your part. We're heading up to the house to assess the furniture before the estate sale. She held out her hand. Do you have the keys, or should we call a locksmith? And in that moment, the blueprint of their cruelty became clear. For them to be the perfect family, someone had to be the failure. Someone had to be small, disposable, invisible. That role had always been mine. If they admitted I was in control, if they acknowledged I was the architect, their entire self-image would collapse. They didn't just want his money. They needed me beneath them to feel above water. They weren't scavengers. They were parasites searching for a host. The lawyer has the keys, I said calmly. The reading is tomorrow. Until then, the house is sealed. Sealed, Ashley scoffed. It's our house. Tomorrow, I repeated and turned away. From my car, I watched them argue with the security team I'd hired to keep the gate locked. They still thought this was temporary. The law firm's conference room was designed to dominate. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling windows, air conditioning set just cold enough to keep you alert. My family sat on one side of the table. I sat alone on the other. My father checked his watch. My mother whispered to the twins. Ashley and Jessica scrolled through real estate listings. They were already spending money they didn't have. They glanced at me once with pity, irritation, and impatience like I was a stain on polished wood. Then the lawyer entered. Mr. Sterling carried no briefcase, just a thin file. He adjusted his glasses. Robert preferred efficiency, he said. So I'll be brief. Just read the numbers, my father said, leaning back. We know he was liquid. Sterling ignored him. To my brother, Jeffrey, he read, I leave you the debt you accrued in 1998. The promissory note for the failed venture is hereby forgiven. You are now solvent. You're welcome. My father blinked. That debt was cleared years ago, he snapped. Where's the cash? Sterling continued. To my sister-in-law Susan, I leave you the silence you gave your daughter. May it comfort you as much as it comforted her. My mother's face drained of color. What is this? She whispered. Some kind of joke. And finally, Sterling said, lifting his eyes to meet mine, to my knees. Alyssa kept of her own life, I leave the entirety of my estate. He didn't pause. The firm, the properties, the investment portfolios, all residual assets, everything. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then it exploded. That's illegal, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. He was unstable. She manipulated him. My mother screamed. She was his caretaker. We're contesting this. Ashley yelled. That's our money. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I watched them disintegrate with the detached focus of a scientist observing bacteria under glass. Sterling raised his hand. There is one more document. The room froze, hope surging back into their faces. He slid a single paper across the table toward my father. It was old, yellowed. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Robert's sharp, deliberate script. Beside it, two looping, careless signatures. My parents. What is this? My mother whispered. A loan agreement, Sterling said calmly. Dated December 24th, 15 years ago. The day you left for the Bahamas. My blood went cold. Perfect. The final execution plus emotional closure high. Main I say fully copyright safe, cleaner language, stronger emotional punch. Or cinematic ending K Sath rewrite Ka Rahahun YouTube narration K Lai optimized. Rewritten final reveal plus ending cinematic copyrights AFE the date. December 24th. The frozen turkey. The dark house. The empty driveway. You borrowed $500,000 from Robert Miller, Sterling continued, his tone clinical, to cover gambling liabilities and maintain your lifestyle. He tapped the bottom of the document. Collateral. The word felt heavier than the money. In exchange for this loan, Jeffrey and Susan Miller agreed to waive all parental claims to Alyssa Miller. Physical custody transferred to Robert Miller. All financial and emotional responsibility relinquished. The child becomes the burden of the lender. The heir left the room. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't been careless. They had negotiated me. I stared at the number on the page. $500,000. That was the valuation. That was why no one called, why no one came back. It wasn't that I was unlovable. It was that the transaction had cleared. I looked up at them. I expected guilt. Instead, I saw irritation. We were drowning. My father snapped defensively. He had the money. It was the only way he'd help. We gave you a better life. My mother cried. You lived in that house. You had opportunities. You cost exactly $500,000. I said calmly. My voice didn't tremble. It was measured, engineered, and you spent it. This is coercion. My father shouted at the lawyer. He can't use that against us. We're entitled to our share. You received your share, I replied. I stood. The chair scraped sharply against the polished floor. 15 years ago, you exchanged a daughter for liquidity. I glanced at the document once more. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a receipt. The room went quiet, except for the steady hum of the air conditioning. I felt no rage, only clarity. The kind you feel when you finally identify the fatal flaw in a structure that was never stable to begin with. Alyssa, my mother whispered, reaching toward me. We're your parents. I looked at her hand. It wasn't reaching for me. It was reaching for access. No, I said evenly. You're borrowers, and your credit doesn't extend here. I walked out without looking back, through the lobby, past the receptionist who nodded respectfully, into the sharp brightness of midday sun. I drove past neighborhoods filled with families I would never resemble, up the winding coastal road, to the cliffside fortress. My house, the gate was open. Security was escorting a familiar black sedan off the property. They had come straight from the firm. Still calculating, my father rolled down his window, his face twisted with fury. This isn't finished. Leave, I said calmly. My voice carried over the ocean wind. Or I'll have you removed for trespassing. You already took everything, I replied. And you spent it. The security guard signaled forward. Their car disappeared around the bend. I stood there a moment, then turned toward the house, concrete, glass, unyielding. It wasn't warm, but it was mine. Inside, I closed the heavy front door, turned the lock, click, the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. I walked to the kitchen table, opened my laptop. Susan Miller, delete. Jeffrey Miller, delete. Ashley Miller, delete. Jessica Miller, delete. One by one, blocked, filtered, disconnected. I dismantled the relationship with the same precision I used to draft blueprints. When I closed the laptop, the house was silent.